This video is going to be on how I swapped in a different set of bucket seats into my 2003 Toyota Tacoma four-wheel drive. I'll start by showing you what the interior looks like. I've already swapped the passenger side, which should give me a good frame of reference for how to do this. I still have to do the driver's side. I currently have a seat cover on there. I do have the tan interior, so as you can see, it is tan. So the first step would be to just remove this seat, which are 4 bolts, 2 down at the front, and then two plastic coverings in the back with 14mm bolts on all 4. I'm going to take those out, take the seat off, and compare it to the new one inside, and then we will go from there. Alright, I now have both of the seats in the garage. As you can see, the one on the right, which is going to be going into the truck, is a little bit larger in the shoulders, a little bit taller at the back. Granted, this one is still higher because it has the original mounting brackets on it. I just pulled this one out. It is also to be noted that taking the driver's side seat out of the Tacoma will have one plug for the seatbelt sensor, but there is not that on the passenger side. Now that I have this in here, I'm going to compare them. This video is more or less intended to show you what it takes to swap a seat, how to make sure that they're going to fit, with some approximations. Digging around the junkyard, I found this one. It's out of a 2010 Mitsubishi Outlander. Measuring for this seat in the junkyard, I just brought a tape measure with me and had some basic measurements. I knew across the 2 seat bolsters was approximately 21 inches, and I know that the Toyota seat rails on center, let me back the seat up a second. I know that the Toyota seat rails on center are about 17 1/8 inches. Measure from outside of one to the inside of the other, about 17 1/8. So when I found the seat out of the Mitsubishi, I measured the same measurements. Bolsters were approximately 21 across. Seat rails on the Mitsubishi, however, were approximately 16 1/4, about 16 1/4. So I knew the rails were close enough that I could get the feet off of the Toyota seat welded onto the base bracket of the Mitsubishi seat. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is getting these original feet off of the lower rail bracket of the Mitsubishi seat. To do so, I'm going to be grinding all the rivets off. However you want to do it, cut and grind and get these feet off of this lower sliding bracket without hurting the bracket. You want that to stay safe. At the bottom of the Mitsubishi seat, I've got it set up on a little project stand, and I put a moving blanket on it just to kind of keep the fabric clean. On the bottom of this one, we got a cross brace bracket in here. It's got some 10mm, I think those are M8 bolts on both sides. You're going to take those out to get this off. The yellow is your seatbelt wire, or not seatbelt wire, excuse me. This is going to be for your airbag. Honestly, I'm just going to be snipping it down here. My Toyota truck does not support seat airbags, and that's a little more involved to wire than I intend to do. I'm just going to keep it stock. This thinner wire here runs around and goes to your seatbelt latch sensor, which I do need in the Toyota because the driver's seat does have a sensor telling you whether or not your seatbelt is plugged in. And the other 2 plugs, though, I'm not actually certain what they are. I may have to look those up. Whatever they are, Toyota doesn't have the support for it in the truck without me doing my own custom wiring, so I'll more than likely just be cutting those out and I won't need them. We need to get rid of the 4 legs to get this thing apart. And as you can see, they're riveted down here, and I don't know how they do it. I think it's some sort of fusion weld where they just heat up the joints. You can see a couple little spots on it. So like I said, you're trying to get to this rail without hurting it, but it's okay if you just mess the feet all up. You need to get down to this rail on both sides, which is where we're going to weld the Toyota feet to. And like I said, I've got a mover's blanket to keep it protected. I also have an additional one which I'll be hanging over the back of the seat and the bottom and the cushion, just to keep it safe as I cut. So, alright, here you can see the difference between this one side where I cleaned it down to the bare rail, and this is the side that I've yet to cut down. I'm using a side grinder and a cutoff wheel, and I'm cutting it real close, and then I'm using a flap disc to grind that rivet head down flat, and I'm grinding that weld down, trying to get it close to this, and then I break it off with a chisel and then grind it clean so it looks like that. Alright, I finished cleaning off the seat rails. I've got all the brackets off, including a couple studs from the factory I just ground flush. So as you can see, ends of the rails are cleaned up. I may have to grind the paint clean in a few spots depending on where I weld them, but as you can see, they're nice and flat. And I'm going to set this aside and begin working on getting the feet safely off the Tacoma rails. Next update is this is the Tacoma seat. On the front, underneath the rails, if you push the lever in and slide it back either direction, there's these little dimples on the end. They're part of the upper rail for the slider assembly. I'm going to grind these rivets down flush. That'll allow the ball bearing cage inside the rail to slide off the end. I'm going to do that on both sides so I can get this entire rail off. I didn't find a good way to just take these rivets out without hurting the bracket. So I ended up getting the entire lower rail cage off, entire rail off on the lower portion. I put this in the vise. I ended up cutting all the way around here and grinding down until I could get safely to this bracket. So first step I found on this is just getting these dimples ground down and getting these lower rails off. Alright, I'm finding that grinding these off alone is not enough. This little dimple here actually hits the bearing inside that cage, as you can see, so it can't slide it off. So I'm going to take the side grinder and I'm going to make 2 slits here to cut that dimple out of this rail. This whole rail is going to get salvaged or scrapped anyhow. I now have both the outside and inside rails taken off. Obviously I had to do a little bit of butchery and chop near where those cages are and got them apart. Like I said, all of this is not going to be saved and these seats will not be reusable, so I'm not too worried about hurting it. Now the objective is going to be to get this bracket off without damaging it. Now we will not be retaining the original guide pin, I guess you would call it. Inside the Toyota cab, it's got a cavity that this goes into, but it does not expose it to the outside weather, so I'm not too worried about covering this. It doesn't go outside the cab. I won't get any rust or anything starting or any water ingress in the cab because of it. So I just have to get this cut off of this bracket. I will probably cut along here, around it as close as I can get, and then just start grinding it. Grind the head off of the back side of that rivet on the inside to get it apart. So I'll update when I get one closer to being off. This is the front left bracket. I've been grinding it down. As you can see, I ground the rivet head from this side and then punched it through with a little round cold punch. Now there's a little kind of like a stud weld right here that's hard to see. You can see evidence of it on the back side. If I'm grinding this down to thin it out, then you can take a wedge type chisel and kind of work it in there. Get it to kind of open up a little bit, and that'll help you determine where it's at. You can see the little fold that it creates underneath the bottom edge where that weld is. So you can kind of break it down like that. You can see where all the clean metal is that I haven't touched the bracket. All the material's there. I haven't compromised its strength, but kind of can work this off and then use the side grinder to grind the rest of that off. Alright, here you can see the ground up piece. Clean on the top, nice and flush. I cleaned it up all the way around all the edges, so whenever the rail sits on it, wherever it lands, I'll should have a clean area to weld to. I also went around and just kind of cleaned up some of that nasty spots, so when I paint it, it'll be a little bit better, reduce some of the rust that was developing. So that's the front left foot, and I'm going to install it in the truck now so I don't misplace where it goes, and I'll work on the other three, get all three of them in the truck before I even set the seat in there to tack weld it. Alright, I apologize for the poor lighting. This update, I have got all 4 feet cut off of the lower rails and mounted into their respective locations. They're all been pretty well sanded, so they're ready for welding. What's next is going to be getting the seatbelt bracket, seatbelt latch off of the original Tacoma seat. So we're going to get a Phillips, remove the trim screw. See if I can do this one-handed. Okay. And then if I can get this seat bracket to pop off. Alright. It's filthy, but this nut has to come off. Man, there's a lot of hair in here. And remember, you don't want to hurt this. You don't want to hurt this wire on here, as it does go to the seatbelt sensor on your dash. So I'm going to have to dig this wire out. So when I transplant it on the other seat, I get to retain that. I don't want that light on my dash blinking. So I'm going to guess a 17. How about let's see, I have this somewhere. Yeah, the unusual 16 millimeter. Let's see if I can do this. Well, I'm going to need 2 hands to get this off, but take this nut off and you'll be able to get this off. And then I'm also going to show you taking the same bracket off of the Mitsubishi seat, because the solution I had was to line them up at a certain distance, cut them both, and overlap them. This is not something to play with. This is safety. If you got in a wreck, you are going to want that seat belt to hold. So I found a way to weld it really strong, strong as, if not stronger than factory. Doubled the metal thickness, bud welded a hole in it, welded all the seams, but I'll go over that. So let me just go ahead and get this one off, and then I'll show you the Mitsubishi one. Alright, here we have the Outlander seat. This on it is a 17 millimeter, already broke it loose. It is very tight from the factory, so you may need some extra leverage. Just be careful not to bend this bracket. It does, I don't know, it seems a little bit chintzy to me, but if Mitsubishi thinks it's safe enough, I'll take their word for it on this one. But get that nut off of there. You can get loose the latch. This is not going to work for our seatbelt. It does not match the Toyota seatbelt. But I also got to unfeed the wire out of here. Now, of course, this wire is not going to work in the Toyota either. So the idea here is going to be take this one, cut it somewhere on the steel in this area, and transplant it with the Toyota one over there. When it's done, it'll look like it's got Toyota on this half, and then this portion will still be Mitsubishi, so it'll still fit the bracket. And as you can see, the bracket's got 2 little dimples welded into it, so when the bolt is tight, it can only swing so far up here. You know, and it doesn't exceed, you know, I guess the general grab area that you'd be reaching for your seatbelt. It isn't gonna, you know, fall between the seats where you can't reach it or anything. So I would like to keep that, and I managed to do that on the passenger one, so that's how I found to do it, was to just keep the lower Mitsubishi portion. So I'm going to get this off of there, and then I'm going to get them on the bench and try to show you a comparison of lining the 2 up and cutting them. I have some of my old examples of previously cut pieces, so I'll be able to use those as kind of a size reference. But let me get this one off, and I will show you it on the bench. The 2 seatbelt latches on the bench. The Mitsubishi one, I just cut the wire, didn't need it. It can be popped apart with a screwdriver. At least that's how the last one was. Like I said, you're not worried about salvaging the electronics in this one, at least not for this job. Maybe I can use it anyways. So just break the housing apart There's a little bit of electrical tape holding the wire in. Let's see if I can get that off. Go. Alright. Like I said, I don't need this wire, so I'm going to go ahead and snip it off. Alright, leaves me with the tail section. The Toyota one, it's got 2 wires running right into it, and it's got 2, let me see what they are, 2 T10 security Torx. They do have the little that's probably not going to focus on that, but it's got the little hole in it, the little post on it, so you can disassemble the Toyota ones even easier, because you can just take the screws out. And once you get the screws out, it should pop apart into 2 pieces. Might need a screwdriver and a little persuasion, but the large hatch, you can get a screwdriver into the back end and pop it up. Kind of pops up on the back and slides off like that. There's the seatbelt assembly. It's a little bit crusty. There's a little retainer clip right there. It's like plastic in a hole in the housing. If you can get a screwdriver behind it, you can pop it off safely. Be sure to clean all the dust bunnies out. Alright, now if I re-review, if I put it back on there and you re-review where it ends, underneath of it, man, this is going to be hard to focus. There's like a little steel step right there, you can see. Whenever I cut the Mitsubishi one, I'm going to cut it somewhere in this area. I'm going to take the Toyota one, cut it up here, straighten this joint out till it's pretty close to straight. I want it to match that straight line of this. I'm then going to cut the Mitsubishi one somewhere in this area, and when they go together, the Mitsubishi one's going to bump into that notch back there. Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe. Here's the example old Toyota one that I cut off last time. So what I'll end up doing is straightening this out in the vise and using it as sort of my template for where I cut. So it's somewhere in that area right there. Like I said, be careful with this one. This is the one you want to keep. The last one, unfortunately, I did drop it and easily chipped one of these little red portions of the button off. It doesn't affect the function of it in the end, but it did make it a little bit wiggly until you get the case apps back on it. So I'm going to get these marked up. I'll show you where I marked them. I got to do some looking at it, get a little closer. I may take a quick measurement of it. But then I'm going to cut it in the side grinder, prep all the areas, and I'll be drilling a hole in it so I can bud weld through that hole, or rose weld, those few terms I've heard it called, to really increase the strength of this. I don't want it coming apart if, you know, in the chance a wreck did happen. Safety is not something to mess with. And if you don't have a trustable welder, somebody that's knowledgeable or experienced at it, I would say either take it to a welding shop or, yeah, that's about it. Pay your friends with some pizza and beer or something, and get them to weld it for you. But just make sure whoever welds it is competent and can do a good job, because safety is not a joke. Alright, let me get these measured up, and I will mark it up with you and show it to you. Alright, I've taken some measurements. Like I said, I had the old Mitsubishi, or the old Toyota base bracket, what are we going to call it, base part, and then this is the Mitsubishi old one. Reference those for some of my cuts. So here's the Toyota one. It's going to be very difficult to see my Sharpie mark somewhere in that area. Coming from the end, we'll do it that way. It's about 3. Oh man, you're never going to be able to see this. You're just going to take my word for it. It's about 3 from the end up to the mark. And on the Mitsubishi one, I measured from the end in right there. It's a 1/4 inch from here over. Not very much, because like I said, you're trying to retain most of this bracket. Go ahead and cut these across that line and this line, and also you can see I straightened the Toyota bracket out quite a bit. It's still got a little bit of a wave in here. I'm going to try to flatten out a little bit more after I cut it, but I'm going to go ahead and cut both of these, and I'll update you. I have now cut the Toyota part I want to retain and keep. Like I said, it was like 3 inches up from the tail end. This is the Mitsubishi one, and like I said, there's like a little lip where the brackets welded together in here, or riveted together. After I cut it, got this. Kind of gonna butt together like that. That'll allow me to weld both sides down this lip and across here. I'm also going to drill a hole in the Toyota one so I can weld it through right down to the back side. So I'm going to go ahead and clean these up and drill the hole in them and prep them for weld. Got them cleaned up for weld. As I said before, this will lay right over it. So final product will look, that's a little crooked, something like that. Whole new piece, and this will still be able to have the bracket put back on whenever I'm done, along with space for the wires to come out at the end. So I just got to go and weld all this up, as well as set the seat in the truck and tack that in place. We have now welded all of these. Didn't get any footage of inside the truck. It's actually pretty hard to set it up and get it all tacked in place. But basically, once these are bolted into the truck, you set these rails on them. Make sure where they meet up is clean of all materials and paint and stuff. And just tack all 4 of these brackets. Make sure the seat still slides, sit in it, make sure it's square and comfortable. But tack it well enough that they don't fall off on you. And then take it out, throw it on the bench, and weld them up. Make sure you get good penetration. You wouldn't want this to come apart in a wreck or anything. So those are all welded up. I'm going to hit them with a coat of paint in a minute. And also here is the seat belt bracket. I know my lighting is pretty poor. You can see the weld in the center, around the sides. If I roll it over, it's welded all 4 sides in that hole in the center. So clean up all the edges on this. You know, don't grind all the weld off, but just clean them up, make it look a little bit better, and hit it with a coat of paint. And after the paint's dried, I can throw the trim back on that seatbelt bracket. And when the paint's dry on this, we can throw it back in the truck. This is after I got all 4 brackets painted. They turned out all right. The paint's a little bit runny. It is a cool evening tonight, but got those done, as well as my seatbelt bracket painted and set up to dry. So hopefully in the morning or tomorrow afternoon it'll be dry and I can reassemble and show you the final assembly and the seat in the truck. Here's the feet of the seat after a coat of paint. They turned out pretty good. Paint dried fairly well despite it being a pretty cool evening. After they're done, they all slide fine, just as they should. Still what's left to do is to put the original housing back on the seatbelt bracket. So I will take this off and take it over to the bench. Alright, now that I have this bracket on the bench, all you really should have to do is clip this bottom portion back on. The wires still come out just fine, despite the fact I added a little bit of material. They had plenty of room. I'll add some electrical tape around here to hold it in place, just like factory used to. Otherwise, it'll just come out right next to the bracket. Take the other piece, slip it over the top, like that. Still works just fine. Take the security T10s, drop them back in the housing, and we'll tighten these up. And it's just plastic, you just need to go snug. circle tip. Like I said, I'm just going to run this right next to it, kind of like that. Just a couple rolls, keep it in place. Not much worse than factory. We're going to take the seatbelt bracket back over to the seat. Set it on there. There's a little spring washer to keep some tension on it. Set it on here. One-handed. Get the nut started. Like I said, as you get this one tight and snug, it'll get to where it only wants to bump into those two dimples right there, and it keeps it within, grabbing range of the seat. Let's see if I can find the wrench for it. It is a 11/16 fits. Alright, that should be plenty. It's tight, not going to come off. And lastly, would be running the wire underneath the seat safely. There's a little bit of a gap kind of in this area. I should just be able to feed it in through there and around underneath the seat. There's an existing clip here. I don't know if I'll be able to get it through it. I could probably just run a zip tie right here and this thing would never go anywhere. You just got to be sure that there's not going to get caught on anything, because this seat does slide forward and back, so you just don't want it to get caught on anything. So I'll go ahead and zip tie this up, and I'm going to throw this seat back in the truck and hopefully give you a good final look at what it looks like when they're both in there. Alright, this is a bit of follow-up on the Tacoma seat swap. It's been probably about a month since I actually filmed the rest of this, the earlier portions, and I've been sitting in them for a couple weeks driving it, and it took a little bit to get used to, a couple days getting used to them, because these are definitely stiffer. But I wanted to give a final look at what they look like mounted in some good lighting. Pretty happy with how they turned out. Not much to it. I do wish this tag wasn't there, but what are you going to do? Hopefully the lighting isn't too terrible, but they turned out quite nice. Fit good, work good. They don't sit too tall. I'm about 5'10", 5'11", and my head, is no closer to the roof than it was before. Some of the other forums and stuff I've read on some seat swaps say that a lot of these seats will end up too tall inside the Tacoma. I'm not finding that the case with these, so I'm pretty pleased. Hopefully I can answer any questions people might have in the comments, but I don't really think there's too much to this. So yeah, hopefully somebody gets something out of this.